Hey everybody, it's your boy, and today's video is about acid attacks, specifically acid attacks in the UK. Now, acid attacks have been, well, let's just say it's not an unusual nor an uncommon crime in our country. In fact, the first recorded one dates back to way back in 1736. However, what is very interesting about acid attacks in the 21st century is that since round about the turn of this decade, the attacks have only spiked. In fact, within the last couple of years, they've doubled. The UK now has one of the highest number of recorded acid attacks per person of any country in the world, and the figure is expected to rise further, police have warned. Senior officers believe the horrific crimes are not always being reported, meaning the unprecedented number of known assaults using corrosive substances may be a fraction of the true total. More than 400 attacks were recorded in 6 months to April, on average of 2 a day. 2 people so far have died as a result of acid attacks, with many more left with life-changing injuries, and pressure has been mounting on authorities to act. Rachel Kearton, the Assistant Chief Constable of Suffolk Police and National Police Chiefs Council NOCC, lead on corrosive attacks, said officers were struggling to respond to the spike without dedicated laws. The UK now has one of the highest rates of recorded acid and corrosive substance attacks per capita in the world, and this number appears to be rising, she told a briefing in London. It appears that in 2017 we will again exceed previous records for the number of attacks, but I strongly feel that this is an underreported crime at this time. Ms Kearton said accident and emergency departments are treating far more people for corrosive injuries than reporting the attacks to the police. She said that domestic violence victims and people involved in gang crime may be reluctant to come forward and call on anyone affected to contact the police. So as you can see, this is an increasing problem, and I'll get into that in a little while, but first, let's delve into some more facts. Now, as you can see in this article, acid attacks have been seeing an alarming rise after a steep decline, although with one bump in 2013, since roughly 2014. And where are they being carried out? London has emerged as a hotspot for acid attacks in recent years, with more than half of incidents taking place in the capital. The number of cases more than doubled from less than 200 in 2014 to 431 in 2016, with Scotland Yard focusing on specific parts of the city. Newham in East London had 3 times more acid attacks than the next highest borough, with almost 400 of London's 1500 reports over the last 5 years happening there. The borough, which includes Stratford's Olympic Park, but also more deprived areas such as West Ham, Plaistow and Forest Gate, borders Hackney, which also saw a spate of attacks in the summer. Nearby Barking and Dagenham was the second biggest hotspot, whereas wealthier areas such as Kensington and Chelsea had the lowest level of attacks. Now, this is just in London, and it's beginning to show a little bit of a pattern here. It's the more poor, deprived areas rather than the richer areas that are seeing a rise in these acid attacks. Areas such as the West Midlands and Essex have also seen large rises in acid attacks in recent years, as reported soared from 340 in 2014 to 843. But attacks have been happening in quieter spots. Nurse Joanne Rand in Frogmore, Buckinghamshire, died after acid was thrown over her as she sat on a bench. The 47-year-old care home worker suffered severe burns and died at Stoke Mandeville Hospital 11 days later. Zenarul Webster, 18, from Hammersmith, West London, has been charged with murder and is due to appear at Reading Crown Court in early April next year. Another tragic case involved an acid attack victim who died at a euthanasia clinic after he became paralysed and blind. In November 2017, Towie star Fern McCann's ex, Arthur Collins, was found guilty on 14 counts after throwing acid in a packed nightclub. And that was actually one of the biggest stories, because for those of you who don't know what Towie is, it means the only way is Essex. And the only way is Essex is basically a Jersey Shore, Geordie Shore offshoot. That's basically what it is. It's a reality TV. And this guy, I think, did it for domestic reasons, not gang-related reasons, if I remember correctly, but I could be wrong. Acid attacks have become such a massive problem that we are now in the esteemed company of countries like India, Colombia, Pakistan, Nepal, Bangladesh, Uganda and Cambodia. This is according to ASCI. Now, I don't know if they're ranking this in terms of these are the worst countries in the world when it comes to acid attacks, but that's the company that we apparently have. And it's pretty clear that Uganda does not know the way at the moment. Now, here's just some more statistics about the numbers outside of the south and the central areas of England. Northumbria, which is in the northeast, where Newcastle is, where Sunderland is, Middlesbrough, although technically that's Yorkshire, recorded the second highest with 109 recorded attacks. Cambridgeshire had 69 attacks, Hertfordshire 67, Greater Manchester, big up, that's where I'm from, 57, and Humberside 52. Of the 2078 acid attack crimes recorded for the year 2011 to 2016, only 414 of those crimes resulted in charges being brought. And that's echoing the police and what they've been stating. Only 414 crimes, which suggests what kind of crimes we're dealing with here. We're not just dealing with acid attacks randomly, we're dealing with gang-related crimes and related with domestic abuse-related crimes. And as we know, with these particular crimes, one thing that links them is that people who are victims tend to not really want to come forward in fear of being killed or possibly maimed even further. Now, those are the numbers, but who's being attacked and who's doing the attacks? So let's take a look at those statistics. On the ACI, they say from 2011 to 2016, there was more male victims than female victims. Male victims were more than double that of female. And this is echoed by further statistics from the Metropolitan Police, which was published in the BBC. The victims of London's violent acid attacks are overwhelmingly male. 4 out of 5 victims in 2016 were men, according to the statistics. From 2007 to 2011, around 50 men and 50 women were attacked each year. Since 2012, however, the number of attacks on men has increased dramatically each year, peaking at 352 in 2016. The statistics paint an unusual picture, according to experts familiar with acid attacks around the world. Jaf Shah is the Executive Director of Acid Survivors Trust International, ASCI, who we were reading just before, said in the 15 years since his organisation was established, he has noted a familiar pattern to acid attacks around the world that is outlined prominently on ASCI's website. Acid violence is a form of violence that has a disproportionate impact on women. In many regions of the world, most attacks relate to gender violence. These attacks are often linked to rejected sexual advances or marriage proposals. However, this does not appear to be the case in the UK. When it comes to suspects, men have consistently made up the majority, accounting for nearly 3/4 of the whole of the last 15 years and 77% in 2016. The proportion of female suspects has collapsed from around 20% 10 years ago to just 2% last year, while the proportion of unknown suspects has doubled in the last 10 years to 20%. This is likely related to a rise in moped gangs, according to Dr. Simon Harding, Associate Professor in Criminology at the University of West London. The assailant may be wearing a mask, balaclava or moped helmet, so the victim might not see them. And this is true, there has been a rise in moped gangs and moped violence recently. In fact, I myself was almost a victim of one. I was at a company function, it was like a charity thing, and there was even a famous celebrity there. And as I left, because I was feeling a little bit tipsy and I didn't want to be drunk in front of all these esteemed people, I left and went to the place where I work just to cool down a bit, and also I was thirsty and needed an actual normal drink. And it turns out that while I walked down the road to get to my place of work, which isn't far away from this function because our parent company owns both places, it got shot at. The place where I was with at the function got shot at. Now, we believe this is mainly to do with bouncers and Salford gangs, because they actually had to travel from Salford to Manchester, which isn't a big journey at all. It's like 10 minutes from where they were. But that just shows, I know it's anecdotal, how big of a problem this can be if they're attacking normal pubs or clubs like that. Now, as you can see in this graph here, there is a gender of the victim, and it's mostly male, apart from in 2009 and 2008 where it seems to be mostly female, and in 2011 it's roughly 50-50. And the gender of the suspects are overwhelmingly male, but increasingly in the 2010s it's unknown, because again, these people are driving on mopeds, they're not going to show their face because they're either wearing a helmet or a balaclava or both. Now, let's have a look at the ethnicities of these people. Who is committing the crimes the most and who's committing the crimes the least? According to the article, the Oscar-winning documentary Saving Face raised awareness of acid violence at a global level, said Jaf Shah, and as a result, many people at a subconscious level may associate acid attacks with Asians generally and Pakistanis in particular. Globally, most attacks occur in South Asia, according to Shah, and this may have contributed to an assumption that London's Asian diaspora is involved in the majority of the UK attacks. There's been a fairly relentless rise in the number of alt-right sites and blogs linking acid attacks to Muslim, Asian and migrants. This has clearly gained some traction, said Shah. Type Asian acid attacks into Twitter, and there are hundreds of people conflating acid attacks with London's Asian population. Now, that is the case globally, and these people have a point. Globally, it seems to be that's where most of the crimes are indeed committed, and in fact, most of the victims globally are, of course, women in these third world areas. Now, here are the actual statistics of the people who are victims and who are committing said crimes. According to these statistics, Afro-Caribbean people are 25% of victims, white Europeans are the most at 45%, Asians at 19%, dark European at 2%. I assume that's people like Italians, Spanish people. I don't understand how that's even a thing. How is that even a statistic? That's not a statistic on the census last I took, but what do I know? Arabian/Egyptian and Orientals both were 2%, and unknown at 2.5%. So that could be mixed race people. But then again, a large percentage of those white people and Afro-Caribbeans could also be mixed race, as are the Asians. And if you want to know what Asian is in this country, it's basically Indians, Pakistanis, Bangladeshis, maybe Arabs at a push, but it seems in this case that they're separating the two ethnicities, and kind of rightfully so, even though it is all Asia. And the ethnicities of the suspects is 38% Afro-Caribbean, 32% white European, 6% Asian, 2% dark European, 1% Arabian Egyptian, 1% Oriental, and 20% unknown, which again could be mixed race to just not having an idea of who they are because they're wearing masks or something. So isn't that interesting? 6% of the perpetrators are Asian, and the ones who are committing the most crimes are blacks and whites. And there's not that much of a difference, it's only 6%. What's also interesting that Asians are only 19%, whereas white people are overwhelmingly the victims. Now I'm going to speculate here and say because it's mostly linked with gang crime and domestic violence, that they're more likely to attack themselves than they are to attack other ethnicities, although that's not always the case, as outlined with some of those stories that I was quoting. Gangs tend to be segregated. It's not the movies where they tend to be integrated. You don't get many of those gangs, and it doesn't surprise me that this is the way it is and why it's mostly males rather than mostly females. It really isn't that surprising if they actually understand anything to do with criminal behaviour. It is a mostly male thing because of our biology. Sorry lads. Some of these attacks have been characterised as hate crimes. However, the Met have said that they've seen no evidence of it, not only in the data, but obviously in the community intelligence as well. They are also occasionally linked to honour killings. In July, Minister Sarah Newton, who has recently been moved to the Department for Work and Pensions from her previous role as Minister for Crime, Safeguarding and Vulnerability, told 5Live, these substances are used in so-called honour-based violence. The statistics from London's police record just one attack in 2011 as an honour crime. It's not something that we're seeing, said Detective Superintendent Mike West. Jaff Shah urged caution. However, it's quite possible that honour attacks in the UK are not simply being reported for fear of reprisal. Police recorded 284 domestic incident-related acid attacks in a 15-year period from 2002 to 2016, just 11% of the violent acid attack total. Now, the number is probably bigger, and for the reasons that they've already outlined, and we can never really know for sure because of that, and again, it seems from the data that it's not the majority of cases. Now, why the switch to acid? Why? What's the rationale behind that? Well, it's simple. Guns are hard to come by in the UK, and especially as the police are constantly on the lookout for them, and especially knives as well. They realise that it's better to hide a bottle of acid, which is harder to find if you get searched or if you walk past a police officer, than it is to bring out a gun, because guns are loud. Even with suppressors, they're going to make noise. Suppressors do not make it silent. And knives, well, knives are knives. Other sorts of logistical problems. It's a tactical switch, essentially. Acid is small, it's quick, you can make a quick getaway on your moped or even on foot. Because it's so small, it doesn't weigh you down. Guns can be a lot heavier than that, and knives as well. There's loads of other reasons behind that. Gangs are just simply changing their tactics, as they always have done for the last 100 odd years. So there we have it. Acid attacks. Mostly committed by blacks and whites, against blacks and whites, particularly whites. It seems to be gang related and domestic abuse related, and it seems to be a tactical choice to use these weapons because of the cons against using guns and knives in the UK, because, well, the police are always going to heavily crack down on these things, and it's better to conceal acid than it is guns and knives. That probably explains the rise in these attacks, and hopefully the statistics help spread some light, at least in London. Now, most of those statistics were for London because that is the hotspot, and those statistics that I showed was in London alone. However, there is a statistic that will be coming out for the rest of England and Wales. There is a survey being done, and it should be published this month, I believe, though I don't know when. and I might make a video on that when it comes out. There we go. Hopefully you found this somewhat interesting. Till next time, it's been your boy, and I'll see you later.